Hey guys, welcome to another deck strategy guide. This week I'm doing a green-blue beasts list, and this is one of the decks that I brought to the last Open tournament, and it managed to win me first place. It does require one DLC. It needs the Fall of Everlife DLC for the Orphan Fugu and Hunt Down, but I will quickly show a sample deck list at the end of the alternative card section in this video on how you could make this work without DLC. But these two cards that I just mentioned here are really the only beast synergy though, so with that no DLC list, it won't be so much geared towards beasts. But Orphan Fugu here is really strong in my opinion, so when another beast is on the field under your control, then it becomes a 5/5 jumper for 4 cost. And usually it isn't the best to rely on another card to make something work, but even as a 3/5 body, it's pretty solid stats for the cost. And many players like to compare this to Mystic Beast, and even prefer running it over Fugu sometimes because of its cheaper cost, but I kind of disagree with exchanging these two creatures here, just because Fugu can be played starting on turn 2 because of its 2 land requirement, but also its ability is able to be triggered at any point in the game, unlike Mystic Beast, whose ability is a gift effect. This Fugu doesn't need to come down on the enemy well in order to get that buff. It can be placed anywhere on the board, and then you just wait for a future turn for a beast to come down, and it'll always be able to get this buff in the future. And Hunt Down is also another really strong card that I like. So this fight mechanic here is used quite a lot in this deck, with also Deepwood Stalker and Frog Tosser here. So fighting means that this creature will attack an enemy creature anywhere on the board, and all of the regular combat things will happen, so they'll both exchange damage with each other, and any other combat effects like Death Touch or things like that will happen. And fighting doesn't count as that creature's attack for the turn also, so just for one, you can use this as a creature you just played that turn, so it doesn't need that one turn to be able to attack. It can be used right away, but then another thing you can do with this is use it to fight something and then attack with the exact same creature all in the same turn, so it pretty much gives one of your beasts 2 attacks in that one turn, which is quite nice to have. And this deck has a lot of beefy bodies to make use of this fight here, such as Deepwood Grizzly or Octopus. So Octopus is really nice because of its flexibility. You get to choose one of these options twice. So if you've got Hunt Down, you could choose to give this +0/+2 twice, making this a 3/7, and then it just allows it to survive. It's got 5 attack when the Hunt Down triggers, and it's a really nice combo there. But also this deck has quite a few jumpers from Water Ellie and Fugu here, so it makes your land placement quite nice. You can build your lands just like you did in my blue jump guide and get some nice double collections going, so Octopus being able to choose that jump ability as well is really strong for it. Even making it just a 7/3 is really nice for fighting like a mono green deck or bargain decks, something like that. And apart from Hunt Down, like I mentioned, we've got Deepwood Stalker and Frog Tosser. So these creatures don't have quite so high a life stat. So one thing that's really nice in keeping these creatures alive is Humbling Vision. So Humbling Vision halves a creature's attack and life rounded down. We've seen this card a few times come up in my guide videos now, but it really helps save the life of your fight creatures and even deal a little bit more damage, sort of damage, to finish off that creature. So for example, if you pair this up with Frog Tosser, then you're able to take down like a 7/7 Colossus or something like that using 8 Faeria, and then with that you also get the Frog Tosser to survive, and the little frog that spawns with it afterwards. So it's quite the powerful combination using Humbling Vision, Frog Tosser, or Humbling Vision Stalker, just to save your creature's life. And I also want to point out Faeria here, because I think a lot of newer players underestimate this card a lot of the time, and this is one of the strongest cards in the game, in my opinion. I think it should be included in probably any deck that can run it in these colors. You get to pick one of these treasures here once you play them down. So Urn of Gabria is usually the pick for most situations. It's quite often the strongest card. It lets you draw 2 cards, gain 2 Faeria. So it pretty much makes this Faeria a 3 cost and lets you draw into more answers. Crystal Dragon, though, is definitely not to be underestimated. It's a very strong card as well if you have the Faeria to play it. To play both in the same turn needs 8 Faeria, but it really gives you incredible stats on the board, as well as charge 3 from the dragon. And Ulani's Medallion is not going to be ever played in this deck, but it's certainly a good tool in other decks. So especially when you're building other decks that include swarm type of creatures, don't underestimate Faeria. Even with Ulani's Medallion can be quite strong. So in terms of alternative cards, like I mentioned before, Mystic Beast, I prefer the Fugu over Mystic Beast, but if you want to include this in another slot of the list, you can go right ahead for that. It's still a really strong card and a beast, so it synergizes with all of these beast things. It does require that lake to be placed on an enemy well, which can be a little bit difficult because in this deck you're building up to 6 lands, so it's a little bit slower. And usually in this case, what helps to claim your Mystic Beast spot is Sunken Tower, and we aren't running Sunken Tower in this list. We've got so many fight creatures and things to control the board, I really don't think it's necessary in this list, but Sunken Tower for sure is a good card in other situations. Also in this list, I don't have Aurora, which is usually an include in any deck that has the colors for her, but my consideration for this, I just didn't find a slot that could fit her in, and all of these creatures are quite beefy to begin with, so in order to get like the best advantage using this gift ability of making a 6/6 creature is if your creatures are already wounded a little bit. But Aurora is certainly a strong card, I just didn't find a place for her. Another one to consider is Tyrannex. So this is kind of on the same tier as Deepwood Grizzly, it's same cost, land requirement, but Grizzly has a little bit more stats, and you always sort of want to value higher life over attack, especially paired with these hunt downs. You're able to give 2 attack to your creatures anyways, so having higher life is usually better. You can fight more stuff with the higher life stat. And then in green, we've got Elderwood Embrace. So I'm running 3 Raynon's Guidance in this list. Embrace, stat-wise, is a lot better a card, but the reason I have 3 Guidance instead is because of this 5 life gain. Also the cheap cost, it's 1 Faeria less, but I find that when you go up against burn, you really need to have heal. But if you're not seeing a lot of burn on the ladder, then Elderwood Embrace is a nice swap in here. And then also because of all of these fight creatures, Tiki Totem is an interesting card to include. So the first creature you summon each turn gains +1/+1. So if you drop a fighting creature like Stalker or Tosser, if it's the first creature you summon that turn, then you get to give it an extra attack and life before that fight trigger happens. So this can be quite nice. The only reason I don't like this so much is because it costs 3 Faeria to play, and it really does nothing on its own. You have to play a creature immediately after in order to do anything, and you've already invested quite a lot of Faeria just to get +1/+1 that very turn. So it really takes like 3 turns in order to gain even reasonable value off of this, and I just prefer being able to play creatures or buffs to immediately interact with the board. Another one to consider that some people have questioned me on in this list is Runin, because she is a beast as well. And also in this list, the requirement is 6 lands, but right now the requirement is 3 lakes and 2 forests, and then the 6th land is kind of up in the air because I don't have any 4 lake things or 3 forest things, and I quite like this because it gives me flexibility on board what I want to build for that 6th land. It could be a lake or a forest. So playing Runin in this list kind of forces me into that 3 lake, 3 forest land requirement. But also, I just don't feel Runin is that strong a card, even. She used to be, but she returns to your hand at the end of the turn. So a lot of players will just leave this on the board, force you to trade in your Runin on your turn, and then you won't be able to play her again until next turn. And yeah, she can get a bit out of hand, but she's really expensive to constantly play each turn, and I just don't like her for that reason. But you might have some fun with her. She's definitely a fun card once she starts getting these incredible stats going. And the only other cards I wanted to talk about were in neutral. So Emperor's Command is a cool card to include, again, because of your fight creatures. So this does a similar thing to Humbling Vision, where it reduces the stats of a creature. So you can reduce those stats and then play your fight creature, and ideally have your fight creature survive because of this attack debuff that it puts on a creature. And it's kind of similar to Runin's Guidance when you're making a choice which card to include, because it also gives 4 life, or does this -2, -1. So it's very similar. Very similar to Runin's Guidance here. So I had a little bit of debate over which of these cards I preferred, and I came to the conclusion that I liked Guidance a little bit better, just because I think buffs on the board are a little stronger. Being able to buff your creatures, it means you can pre-buff things to, like, say you want to get out of Flame Burst range, you could pre-buff this water elemental. Whereas if you have Emperor's Command in hand, it doesn't really, you can't do that. If they've got no creatures on the board, it's not doing anything for you. But it's definitely consideration because of that -2, -1 for your fight creatures. And then the last card is Llamacorn. So this is a fun card. It looks like a meme at first, but I've actually played around with this quite a bit, and I actually like this card a lot in this list. It is a beast, and its combat lets you draw a card and gain 2 life. So I used to have these in place of my Deepwood Grizzlies, but I started to favor the extra life instead of the 5/5 stats. But I think that this is still a really strong card when you face a lot of burn on ladder. There was a time where I was just constantly facing burn on ladder, and that was the only deck people were playing. So I decided to punish that by putting Llamacorns in place of these Grizzlies, and it's really nice for that because of that 2 life that it gains. You've got 8 starting creatures here. So for the Mulligan, you're looking for Water Ellie, Orphan Fugu, or Deepwood Grizzly. So if you don't have any of these in your starting hand, do a full Mulligan to get one of these. And other than that, it's pretty open for the cards elsewise that you want. The only thing you don't want in your starting hand, really, is these Highland cards, like Frog Tosser and Fogoro. But anything else works pretty well in your opening hand. Even Hunt Down, it's a little bit costly, but it's such a powerful card that I think it's worth keeping. Then the other consideration is Ancient Boar. You do need something with 5 life. You'll probably want something in hand with 5 life, otherwise you'll want to toss this. but that's pretty much all you're looking for in the mulligan here. And as promised, here is a no DLC list that fits a similar role to what the Beast deck is trying to do. I haven't tested this deck at all, so use it at your own caution, but it's kind of similar cards and numbers that you would see in a list like this. I did include 2 sunken towers because we've taken out the mobility from the Fugus being able to jump and the hunt downs, so it's nice to have this movement because your creatures aren't very flexible in their movement. They're pretty solid creatures. Another option for green-blue is like a green-blue jump list, and I briefly showed that list in my last video, so be sure to check that video out if you just want it for the list. But there's a lot of things to consider in the green-blue archetype. It's very strong colors, one of the strongest color combinations out there at the moment. So there's a lot of flexibility and options for a deck like this. Alright, so for land placement in this deck, it's kind of nice because, like I said earlier, you have the option to build either 3 forests, 3 lakes, or 2 forests and 4 lakes because of that 6th land flexibility that I've made for it. So you can just make this decision as the match goes on and play that 6th land to your hand or the board state, whatever suits the moment. You're usually going to want to start with a land in the center tile, but what color to put here is a bit interesting because of all of your starting creatures. So just like my blue jump guide, you want to set up your lakes on the collection spots, and including the center here. So you want your lakes here, here, and here, just so that your jump creatures are able to jump between the wells and alternate switch sides like this really nicely. So if you have a water LE opener, it makes this really easy. You just start with your lake center, and then on your second turn, you'll put a forest next, water LE, and then drop that lake on that spot just like you wanted. And so it's really strong for that, but also putting this forest here allows you to get access to your 2 forest cards like Hunt Down on the next turn, whereas if that was a lake, you'd have to build up forests all over again. So it's really nice to put a forest here. Just anywhere between the well is really nice for forest spots. So here and here are good for the forests, and then the lakes between the wells, of course. And for your 6th land, it can be kind of nice to drop that 6th forest right here on this spot, just for your grizzlies. And this is really the only card that is going to be a little bit awkward with your land placement. And just because most of your creatures here can go on lake tiles, so that's the huge consideration as where your lake tiles go usually. Ancient Boar has dash 2, so it doesn't matter so much where the forest goes for this card, as long as you have a forest somewhere like in this line of lands. It's able to dash pretty much anywhere it wants to. And Deepwood Stalker is a card that you generally want to use as a collector if it manages to survive a fight, because it's pretty weak. It's just a 2 attack creature. So again, it doesn't matter so much where that Stalker comes down. If it comes down here, it's in a perfect spot where it can collect. So back to considering what our starting land should be. Like I said, you ideally want this to be a lake, but with Orphan Fugu, it only has jump so long as you control another beast. So if you are going first, you could drop that lake center and then forest second, just like I mentioned. And this is a good play as long as you have that other beast in hand that can come down on that forest on turn 3, which allows Fugu to jump over and collect. So the only cards that work for this are Octopus, Grizzly, and the Ancient Boar. These are the only cards that will allow you to play it down like this and give it jump and hop over to get that collection. And it's going to have to be something that can come down in a forest. So those are the only 3 cards that work here. Stalker does work, but I would avoid this option, and I'll explain why in just a second. So if you don't have the second beast in hand, then I'd instead start with a forest center and then place a lake second, and you can drop your Fugu on that lake. And then this way it guarantees that you'll get that collection next turn, and at least you can set up a lake on this well spot, even though you've missed out on this one. So the reason you don't want to use a lake here in forest with a stalker in hand as your beast for this consideration is because you have to make this decision on turn 1, and since you're going first, you have no idea what your opponent's going to play, if they're going to drop a stalker target for you. So it's a safe bet if your only beast in hand besides Fugu is that stalker, just do this opening play as well with forest, lake, and then lake, of course, on the well. Going second is completely different, of course, since you have the explore, so you can just go lake, and then next turn you go explore, and then lake, drop Fugu on the well. And here it doesn't really matter if you have a second beast, because you're still securing that collection spot. And the last option for starting is having Grizzly in hand on turn 2. Now, of course, if you're going first, you can always start with Lake Center and then put a forest, drop the Grizzly, and that works out really nicely with your land placement. But if you're going second, you have the option to play Grizzly on turn 1, which I would always go for 100% of the time. So here, because I've got the Explorer, I can go Explore Center first, place my forest and my Grizzly on turn 1. And this gives a land later on for your jumpers to hop on in order to switch sides. Also, you do have the option, if you want, to change this prairie here into a lake later on. I don't usually like this option. It's usually better to build more lands rather than transform an already built land, but it's still a nice option to have later down in the future. So now when picking which side to go down, you want to try and gauge whether you would win the game if you decided to fight the same side that your opponent goes down. And you have a lot of beefy bodies in the deck, and hand tricks as well, so sometimes it's a good idea to fight the same side. A lot of the time it can work out, but I'd recommend experimenting with this a little since it will take a little bit of experience to figure out. You want to try and figure out first what style of deck they might be playing before making this consideration. So here my opponent built that desert to the side first, so it's a possibility that he could be playing like yellow flyers, and a lot of the yellow flyers creatures have a cheap 5 attack stat, and a lot of my creatures have a just have a 5 life stat. So I may want to go down to the opposite side in this situation. I do have Grizzly in hand in this start, which is really excellent at fighting these flyers, but if this happens to die from choking sand or something, now I'm only left with my 5 life guys, so I think I'd feel a little bit more confident going to the opposite side here. But like I said, experiment with this. A lot of the time going opposite side is fine anyways, because of all your fight creatures, you can deal with stuff on the other side. Just takes a little bit of experience. But let's get into a sample match now and see how this deck goes. Alright, I like Grizzly going second, so I might just keep this. I could toss the octopus. There's a lot of different things that could be better. Especially going second, getting up to 3 lands is a bit difficult. Yeah, maybe I'll keep it actually. Why not? There's a lot of heavier land cost things in the deck, so I'd rather not draw into those. So I just have to pick a side. Being blue, he'll probably go to the opposite side, but this hunt down will be very nice to have. Boar is pretty nice. So we'll just have to stop up there and pass for now. Because this is blue, I don't want him getting such aggression that early. I might consider going to the opposite side here. Oh wow. Spiders, interesting. So yeah, I think I want to go to this opposite side here. I might dash the boar onto the lake. Can use the spider to clear one of these, if that's worth it. I also have an octopus I can play. So the one punish here is like a mirror phantasm or an aurora. So having this 2 attack might be nice to have. I think I will go for that. Might as well. And I'm going to kill off this one here. So if he wants to collect, if he wants to double collect, he's going to have to build a land there, and that's his only option for the double collect. And it won't give him any option to clear this. So I think that's a reasonable line. Going to retreat. So here's where Hunt Down is really excellent. So I can use my Grizzly that's not really doing much over here and knock down the life stat of this, preserve all my life here. Double Hunt Down. So double Hunt Down could be worth it. Probably both would go on the Grizzly here. So double Hunt Down just full clears the board. So I'm not sure if I like that. Kind of developing another octopus seems a bit better to me. So definitely want to take this clear here. Either lake in between the wells or lake in between the wells here and just have my Grizzly start double collecting. Also I wanted this octopus to come down, so maybe I want the octopus up in his face here. Yeah, so let's put octopus here. Could even taunt this, actually. No, taunt is never usually a good idea. The only thing that taunt would really do is prevent his collection that one turn. And he'd have to build a land to skirt around and kill one of these. But in the long run, I think the life stat is going to be a bit better, especially with Hunt Down in hand. This gives me a really tanky life stat to use that Hunt Down with. Yeah, I like this a bit better, establishing that octopus there to be able to fight his things here. I really want to prevent him from collecting off these wells so he doesn't get his Colossus so easily. Oh, it's a green blue list. Interesting. So now he's on 5 land, so he gets Frog Tosser next turn. So I'll have to be a little bit careful about that. This Stalker is a little vulnerable to it. Oh, I get a Tosser of my own. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to play around that too much, though. Definitely this Hunt Down comes. Probably on this. So 4. Yeah, that sounds good to me. And I want to build up these special lands still, especially since I've got that Frog Tosser. So we're going to step between the wells, get some double collection going. If he does toss, he might even toss over here. But then I get to toss the little frog that spawns as well. The other option is him tossing this. So I would love to be in a double collection spot to be able to answer that. So I'll just stay here for that reason. No need to step up just yet. Green-blue sort of lists are really good at coming back on the board. Even though like I've full cleared the board and set up like quad collection, I'm in a pretty solid spot for myself, but green-blue can do some pretty tricky things with these frog tossers. Be able to get 2 creatures onto the board and kill a creature. This is just such an incredibly strong card. But I'm feeling quite confident with this quad collect and frog tosser in hand, so tosser is a really good answer for another tosser. My lands are a little bit strange right now. I don't need this frog tosser land. I might even consider double neutral because I need to get some aggressive land to push up here, so I think this will be a double neutral for now. This does open up a Ninja Toad line, but he's just played one, so I'm not super concerned about that. But I'm gonna give this jump and 2 life. And so this lets me fight the little toad that spawns from the frog tosser if I want, or gives me an option for a nice double collector as well. A lot of range on this. XoQo is another good sort of comeback card because of how cheap it is for the solid stats with that urn. So he's searching for tosser for sure from that. Ooh, double tosser. That's quite sad for him. So one of these tossers is going to come down aggressive up here, I think. And I picked this spot over the well spot because I have a line to face. So if I toss this one, and it doesn't matter so much which one, so I'll probably toss this one, and then just clear both of those. So I want to toss this. Yeah, this guy first. And that lets me hop onto this spot for that double collection. Clear this guy. And the next tosser right between the wells seems good. And that's going to be really difficult for him to come back. So even with all of these beefy bodies, there we go, I don't need to win just by pushing them up into face, especially against a green-blue matchup as well. I have the option to just set up collections and keep control of the board, and like in this scenario where I've got so much creatures on the board now, it's just impossible for him to come back, so he just surrenders. So that's where my win condition is I have the option to go face with a lot of beefy stuff, but I also have the option to just go for a more control style of game. So thanks for watching. I hope you learned from this, and have some fun with green-blue beasts.